Oh, hello again, everyone. That's so goofy. Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of my YouTube channel show, Culty. It's the show where I drink beverages with you and we talk about cults. Today we're going to be talking about Vissarion and the Church of the Last Testament. You might know this cult. They were in the news last year because their leader had actually been arrested for various reasons, which I'll get into in a moment. But first I need to do a disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes, for entertainment purposes. Nothing violent really happens in this cult, but there are a lot of things of a morally gray nature, I will say. I don't think this one really has anything that would be too whack. Yeah. By the way, do you guys like this? Is this fun for you? In the room, I didn't think about how it would cut off right here. Maybe I should put something else fun here. Give me an idea of what to put over here. I'm all open to ideas. Anything will do, really. Maybe some taxidermy. Alright guys, per the usual, I've got my drink and here's yours. Let's get into it. So the leader of this cult's name is Vissarion, or that's what his followers called him. His real name is Sergei Torop, and he was arrested on September 22nd of 2020 under charges of harm, extortion, and running an illegal religious organization. Let's talk about him before he decided to start this cult. Vissarion had a pretty normal youth from what I could tell. He was born on January 14th of 1961 in Krasnodar, Russia, which was the USSR at the time. So there wasn't really anything that was really of note from his childhood. There were mentions of him being a needy child. His parents divorced when he was 7 years old, and they didn't seem to really give him a lot of attention. So part of the accounts of Vissarion's youth do come from within the cult. He had a chronicler that would basically follow him around and write his life story for him. His name was Vadim. Vadim would say things like how Vissarion was born to his mother who was a virgin, how his father's name Anatoly meant from the Middle East, and he just kind of embellished it to make it sound more fantastic and holy and important than he really was. The overall flavor they tried to give him was tragically misunderstood, biblical, holy, secretly important. You know what I mean? Tragic hero kind of stuff. So at this time when he was born, the USSR was atheist, and they would do their best to kind of suppress any other religion, or at least that's kind of what I understood from my research. And so his grandmother, since his parents divorced and were kind of neglectful of him as a child, his grandmother raised him, and she was very Christian. And so she would try and take him to little services and really instill religion in him, which I think made a big impact on him later in life. Vissarion really disliked the oppressive nature of Soviet society, and at age 18, it's compulsory for somebody to enter the army and serve a certain number of years, and of course he hated it. And after he was allowed to leave the army and just kind of live his life as he wanted, he became a traffic control officer. He only had that job for a couple of years before he lost it because he had been drinking during his shifts. So a year after Vissarion lost his job, he has kind of this lost period in his life, and he claims to have this revelation, this great revelation, that he's actually Jesus Christ reincarnated. And this was only 2 years before the fall of the USSR, and during tumultuous times throughout history, it's very common to see cults pop up because it's only natural. People are looking for answers. Vissarion had this belief that the world was corrupt and he was the only one that could fix it. He was reading a lot of philosophy, a lot of things about Eastern religions, a lot of literature that talks about respecting nature. He had spent a period of time where he had left his wife and children, his family. He had a family by this point, and he had just left them at random, and he had claimed that he went wandering through Siberia, just, ogling at the wilderness, having revelations. Whenever Vadim would write about Vissarion, he made a point to actually not mention his wife, his children, this family that he had, and he also would not try to mention his parents as well because they didn't really want to kind of give away where Vissarion had actually come from and what his background was. They ended up only mentioning his wife and children once in this massive, would it be called a biography, I suppose? A biography that they had written about his life. His wife and children are only mentioned once, which is kind of damn, okay. So I mentioned previously that Vissarion had gone on this soul journey through the wilderness, leaving his family behind temporarily, and he experienced something which is stated in the cult writings, so take it as you will. He experienced something called the Three Temptations, and it's kind of strange because they're not even really temptations. It doesn't say what happened, it just says where they happened. I think they just call them the Three Temptations because In the Bible, when Jesus goes into the desert and he experiences temptation, because it's supposed to represent that he was also a man and just like the rest of us, things like that. And I think that was what they were trying to relate to, is it's Bible fan fiction. They're just writing Bible fan fiction with their own insert OCs. Does that make sense? So let's get into like the 3 temptations that Viserion experienced in his journeys while he was like on this soul search. The first happened in the Ural Mountains, about 300 miles away from where the Dyatlov Pass incident occurred, which is like, The second was actually at a rest stop, like a bus stop or like a gas station on his journey back to his home. And the third actually gets a little bit more specific. His third temptation was whenever he fancied himself a painter. And that's why his family didn't really have a lot of money, his wife and him and his kids. Because he wanted to not work as a traffic officer or get any other job, he wanted to be a painter. He was commissioned by a church, I believe it was a branch of the Russian Orthodox Church, a specific one, in some town he was visiting. And they said, hey, we want some portraits of saints that we want you to paint them. And he said, okay. So they give him a down payment and he starts these paintings and he finishes them and he shows them to the church. And they're like, oh, like, we don't really like that. Can you fix it? And like, they just didn't think it looked very good. And he just said no. So they took their money back. And I don't really know the details, but I can only imagine his wife was like, are you kidding me? Fix the paintings. Of course he didn't. It's also really interesting to note that this Orthodox church that commissioned him to paint these saintly portraits, they had him baptized in their religion because they thought it would be weird to have someone outside their religion painting their religious figures, which like makes sense, but it's just kind of like, why can't y'all cut loose a little bit? So Viserion, Sergei, he goes on this soul journey. He comes home to his wife and kids with no money and he says, honey, I'm home. And he kind of realizes after this big spiritual, I'm the Jesus moment that he had, that he needs to write it down. And so he starts writing what's called the Last Testament. The Last Testament is supposedly the work that comes after the New Testament, and it has rules for living, daily living for these cult followers. It says things like no technology, no tobacco, no alcohol, no drugs. You have to be vegan. The whole idea is that they wanted to live in this utopian society, one with nature. There's also themes of impending apocalypse, reincarnation. This is around the time where he started to kind of like style himself to look like Jesus. So Viserion writes the Last Testament, and then he goes around Russia preaching his word to the people, and he gains a few hundred followers by the first few years in the early 90s. And then he has all of these followers, and he takes them and his wife and children into the Siberian wilderness, an area that he had wandered around in during his like soul journey that he went on. And he finds the perfect location for their utopia, and they build it there. They call this utopia the City of the Sun. Viserion has this very lovely home with electricity and running water, lots of very good food. His children have even a computer to play games on. And if you remember, the cult's not allowed to have technology, so a lot of ex-members of the cult really resented that, but there were even members of the cult who didn't really see a problem with this. They figured like, oh, he's the savior. He can have whatever he wants. Like, he deserves it. Him and his family deserve it. And so they didn't really ask any questions about it. And alternatively, a lot of ex-cult members have said that they lived in like a barracks situation, that they were sleeping on really hard beds or the floor. They didn't get a lot of food to eat because food and shelter were the exchange of kind of like, as long as you believe in me and show me how much you believe in me to be your savior, like you will get food and shelter, which is not healthy, not a healthy relationship, obviously. You have to give Viserion and the cult all of your money whenever you enter the cult, and so people would enter this cult and they would sell all their worldly possessions. I remember I even read a story about a woman whose sister was staying in her apartment, and her sister sold not just her things, but her sister's things as well. So this woman's stuff got sold by her sister, so her sister could give all of this money to Viserion and the Church of the Last Testament. So not only did you enter this cult, you have no money because you gave it all to the cult, and you don't have really anywhere nice to sleep, you don't have enough food to eat, and you're worked till you're exhausted. On top of all of that, the cult rejects medical assistance. So if you got very sick, there was really nothing you can do about it. So this cult also has an apocalyptic worldview, which is very dangerous for a cult. If you know anything about other cults that have apocalyptic worldviews, you know how like suspicious and worrisome that can be. And it's really grim to realize that all of these things like shelter and food were in exchange for complete obedience to Viserion. So we've got all of like the hallmarks of a cult: selling all of your belongings to join, living in squalor and working your butt off just for the sake of one person and their own personal gain. If you even had the idea that you didn't want to be in the cult anymore, it would be extremely difficult to leave because you would be ostracized from everybody that you knew. You would have no money, no personal belongings. You would pretty much just have to walk out of the little town that they built on your own 2 feet and hope you get somewhere and that you can figure out your life. And that's why cults are dangerous. You get separated from everybody that really cares about you, and you give everything up for one person who you think is going to change your life and make you better, but in reality, they're just out for themselves. So on top of all of the things happening within the cult that are like morally gray or just really suspicious in general, you also have the fact that Viserion is like a mega creep. I wish I could say that this part is not common to cult leaders, but it's always the same things with cult leaders. It's always money and a lavish lifestyle and women. Whatever. So one of the things that the cult has in their little town that they've made, their utopia, is a school for maidens. And it's basically just teaching women how to lead a good, religious, pious lifestyle and never rise above her husband. So get this. Viserion divorces his first wife, and I believe he even like moved them out or like has them in a different house or something somewhere because he remarried a 19-year-old. And get this, that 19-year-old, he knew her since she was 7. Sir, you're old. Anyways, the cult had a lot of paperwork submitted. A lot of attempts were made for them to be formally recognized by the Russian government as a legitimate religious organization. But this kind of backfired. It just kind of told the Russian government, like, hey, we're here doing like suspicious things. And they weren't really having it. The government was like suspicious of this cult from the beginning. They thought it was weird. So on September 22nd of 2020, Russian authorities went into the cult and they arrested Viserion on charges of extortion, harm to others, and illegally running a religious organization. They also got a lot of the other main leaders of this cult, including Vadim, like the chronicler that we keep mentioning. If convicted, each of these members will receive about 13 years each in prison, I'm assuming? Prison and jail are different. I'm gonna just say it's prison. I kind of can't wait to see how this trial goes. Maybe when the trial is over, I'll update and maybe we'll get like some more deets on what's happening. I think this is also a very good example of one of those cults that aren't necessarily like evil or whatever like you think a cult would be, but it's just they do nothing to actually help the people that join them. And I mean, that's what a religious movement is supposed to be for. It's supposed to be for self-betterment, connections to others, the sense of community. That's what it's about. And cults just don't provide that for people, no matter how fun they sound. Because I mean, in theory, it pans out, like living in the wilderness and farming with people and living a simple lifestyle. There's nothing really wrong with those ideas, but the fact that you have to not talk to any of your family members and you have to give up everything that you own is pretty serious, and it's not going to help anybody. Well, thanks again today for spending your time with me and drinking beverages. I hope you had fun listening about this funky little Siberian cult. Once again, any recommendations for this naked wall over here, I would love. Smash that like, subscribe, you know the drill, and I'll keep trying to upload every Monday. I'll see you next week, okay? Bye! Do you guys like my sleeves? I thought you would be able to see them on camera, but you can't. I love these sleeves. I have had a long day. I have had a long day. Let's start our own cult together, and then let's all just go buy an island, and we'll just, like, I don't know, raise sheep and mind our own business. I don't know how to raise sheep.